What defines who we are? Is it the rules that we follow, or is it the choices we make when those rules are tested? Because it's one thing to believe something when it costs you nothing. It's another thing entirely when it costs you everything. And Star Wars has always been about those moments when identity collides with compassion, when a Jedi chooses attachment, when a son chooses redemption, when a soldier lays down their weapons. And in The Mandalorian Season 1, that question becomes deeply personal. We have a lone bounty hunter. He's shaped by creed and survival, and he's given a job. It's simple. It's clean. It's professional. Until it isn't. Because this time, the target is a child. And in choosing what to do next, Din Djarin doesn't just change his path. He begins something that will ripple all the way into The Mandalorian and Grogu this May. This is where the Mandoverse really begins. It's not with a battle. It's with a choice. Welcome to Tatooine Sons, a Star Wars podcast. We believe that pop culture is modern mythology, that there is a story, it is written on our souls, and that these myths speak to that story. And that's why we're on our own hero's journey leading toward the release of The Mandalorian and Grogu on May 22nd. And in this episode, we're going back to the origin story of the Mandoverse, The Mandalorian Season 1. And as always, of course, I'm joined by Samuel the Hutt and BB Nate. But before we get to that, please take a moment to like and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our discussions that go so much deeper than canon Easter eggs and potential spoilers and rumors and crazy theories sure to go wrong. Our hope is to look back at The Mandalorian and see the deeper myth that is being explored.
This is Tatooine Sons.
All right. So if you had to take one Mandalorian gadget with you into the real world, what are you picking?
That's a tough question.
That's easy.
What?
All right, go for it.
It's just jetpack. I do not want to deal with the freaking traffic on the Bayway anymore.
You got a point.
I want to fly over the water and get to my places on time instead of having to deal with people getting into wrecks.
I feel like that's too obvious.
Yeah, I mean,
choice,
it's the natural one to pick.
Right. I don't know.
As a Boba Fett super fan, what are you picking?
I mean, I don't know. The Mandalorians made some good use of that little grappling hook thing.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of want
Some of the
that.
crazy stuff that he
Actually,
does.
I just want the gauntlets they have, the little van braces.
That feels like
no.
too much.
It's all one thing, so it's.
Wait,
I'm gonna
now, are
count
you
it.
talking about like with the whistling birds and all that stuff in them?
Maybe not the whistling birds. I don't know how often I'd use that, but maybe like the shield and the
I don't know.
flamethrower
There are people.
and the grappling hook. I could find a way to use those, or the knife. I could use those.
Which Mando gear is actually the most useful day to day? Probably the flame.
No,
Probably.
flamethrower. Yeah,
The flamethrower. Yeah, I could see that.
yeah,
I
definitely.
have sat on our back patio during the mosquito infestation during the summer.
The
and wished
flamethrower.
I had a flamethrower,
Yeah.
so I guess that would. So
That's a good point.
that's cool. So it's hard to believe it's been 7 years
It's been 7 years since Mando.
Mandalorian. It'll be 27. It was 2019.
No way.
November of 2019. So we're just a few months away from it having been 7 years since that big moment. Now, I got spoiled on Baby Yoda earlier in the day.
That's right. I remember you mentioning that. Yeah.
Afterwards, I told you
Mhm.
that I had seen pictures of Baby Yoda. I had no idea what the context was. But what was your reaction to seeing Grogu that very first time at the end of episode 1 of Mandalorian?
And you're asking me to remember something 7 years ago. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. I mean, I was definitely surprised. I don't think anyone could have predicted that happening. Especially, I mean, there have been 2 instances of us seeing Yoda's species, and it was Yaddle and Yoda at this point. We thought that was it, and now there's a little kid, and that opens up a whole other can of worms in terms of questions and stuff. So it definitely changed the way you look at Star Wars a little bit. Like there's more going on behind the scenes that you don't quite realize.
What about you? Do you remember at all what your reaction was?
I remember that I was definitely surprised. I just remember in general enjoying the episode and more curious what was coming next week instead of just I remember myself not being like Grogu was really cool. Well, he wasn't Grogu. Baby Yoda at the time.
Everybody was calling
was
it Baby
really
Yoda
cool.
immediately. Yeah.
But I kind of wanted to see where the show was going to go with that more than anything else. I was more curious about that. And then I rewatched the episode so many times for the next week. I remember that we moved into that house and like the first thing was we got to get our TV set up so that we made sure we could watch Mandalorian that night.
That's
and then you somehow still got spoiled.
No, it wasn't actually. We had been in that house. What this was we got a new TV. We drove to Best Buy.
That's right.
And got a 70-inch 4K TV, and I couldn't fit it in the car, in the back of the Kia. So we had the back of the Kia open, and we had to take everything out of the box and put the TV in the back of that. And somebody I think you were holding down the TV while we drove all the way to basically almost Monument.
Yeah.
To do that. That was a lot of fun. And so we could watch it in 4K. That was cool.
It was worth it too.
It was. If there was one episode from season 1 of The Mandalorian that you would go back and watch, which would you pick?
I'm gonna be real. Don't know.
Really?
I've only watched the season 1 twice, and it's been a long time. I was hoping to rewatch it and
School,
everything.
Girlfriend.
So,
what about you, Sam? While he's thinking about it,
I mean, I just rewatched the whole series fairly recently. There's something about, I don't know, the first and the last episode, there's just something about them. I mean, the first one, it really showed us something completely different that we'd never seen in Star Wars. I mean, that opening scene alone immediately told you were in for something totally different, right? From the soundtrack to the action to the character, it was perfect. You were in a Western, but it wasn't a Western. It was perfect, right? And then you have the ending with Grogu, and that was mind-blowing, right? And the fight with IG-11 before. But that's in the last episode.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
And that was also huge, too. But you also had just super cool moments in that one where he picks up the E-Web blaster and is just holding it, or he jumps and he, like, blows up the TIE fighter after, just learning how to use the jetpack and stuff. So both of those episodes, not only did they have big revelations, but there were just some really, really cool moments in there too. And you had him removing the helmet for the first time in the last one. I would probably go with the finale. I think. Cool.
Yeah, the finale was amazing, especially with IG-11. I'm a big droid person, so IG-11's story in the first season was awesome to me. And the Darksaber reveal was crazy. I remember being very shocked by that and very ready for season 2. And then we had to wait like 2 years or something like that.
Was it 2 years?
It felt like forever.
It did feel like forever.
With it. I would say that when I think back on season 1, the one episode that always stands out to me is Sanctuary. It's episode 4, which is one of the most low-key episodes. That's the one where they go to the planet after he leaves.
Oh,
I mean, you just had this massive climax of the sin.
Yeah,
where he betrays the bounty hunter guild. He goes back and gets Grogu from the client, and they leave. And it was just this huge moment. And then they choose to go to this really quiet episode
with the farmers, right?
But it felt like Kurosawa.
Seven Samurai, that kind of stuff, yeah.
To it, like you're going to this village, you're helping these people. He's with save themselves from this oppressive group,
right?
Which reminds me a lot of like Star Wars Visions, the Ronin episode,
yeah,
all of that. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, and I absolutely love that episode. Well, just to make sure that we're all on the same page for the Mandalorian season 1, kind of thinking through what we're going to talk about. I'll give a recap of the season here. So the Mandalorian season 1 follows Din Djarin. He's a bounty hunter. He's defined by unbending creed. And his life is absolutely disrupted when a very routine contract leads him to what we now know as Grogu, Baby Yoda. With this is a child that not only awakens compassion within Din Djarin, but it also awakens a lot of conflict within him. And so he moves throughout this entire season from this isolation, lone bounty hunter type role to guardianship. He's choosing that responsibility over himself throughout the entire season, and really being detached. What I think is a really interesting thing as you start thinking about future seasons of The Mandalorian with that. So he's in this fractured galaxy. You've got this new republic that's not succeeding, we find out with it. And this journey throughout this whole thing reveals that identity in Star Wars doesn't have to be about your bloodline.
Mhm.
It can be about who you choose to be with this. So first, let's talk a little bit about the creed and the mask and all of that we pick up, that we learned starting in the very first episode of The Mandalorian. Din Djarin begins as something very solid. He's defined, he's unquestioned,
Mhm.
and that's all summarized in what they say over and over and over again in the first half of the first season. Specifically, this is the way. Right. That is the solid piece of that. So for me, his armor is more than protection. With this, it's his identity. He's got the helmet; it's never removed. It becomes a physical boundary between who he is and who he may become at some point in the future. But beneath all of that Beskar, we learned that there is a child who was saved.
Right.
As a child, he was a foundling that was shaped by his loss of family.
Right.
With that. So season 1 quietly asks the question, is Din Djarin following a creed, or is he hiding inside of it? With that, because as we talked about a little bit with identity a moment ago, in Star Wars, it's never as fixed as it feels when you first meet a character with that. So let's talk a little bit about this. Why do you feel like Din Djarin follows the Mandalorian creed so strictly, especially at the beginning of season 1? Why is he so committed to it?
I think it's all he has at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just a bounty hunter doing a job from here to, from one point to the next. And between that, he's got no identity outside of being a Mandalorian in the covert, right? So he has to do it. And I think it is largely protection. I mean, when we meet Din Djarin in season 1, he doesn't trust anyone or anything outside of maybe some of the Mandalorians in his covert, right? He hates droids, and he keeps everybody else at a blaster's length at least, right? And that's one of the great things about the characters throughout the series, which we'll get to, eventually. But you see his friend group grow exponentially.
Yeah,
he's got droids that he trusts. He's got all ththese different kinds of
His
people
fellowship.
that he brings in now, right? His fellowship. But at the beginning, just like the covert is supposed to be, you're hidden. Everything is hidden behind your armor. Nobody can even know what you really look like. And he uses that to kind of keep everybody at arm's length, because he probably doesn't want to see anyone lost again, like he saw his presumably his parents and stuff, as we see in later flashbacks. So
Yeah, I agree. I think like you said, it's all he knows. He was rescued, depends on how you look at it, by these Mandalorians and raised for this being all he knows. It's a common thing you see, like, even when you're going to like real world stuff with like heavy, deep religious cults and that stuff. People born into them, like that's all that they know. They wouldn't know any different. And so the second that Din we see in this first season, the second he breaks from that, like you said, Dad, we go to episode 4, which is breaking down a lot of Din's walls very quickly, because he broke one of the rules of Bounty Hunter Guild. So what he already knew is now being broken down. So then we're able to know more about Din from there.
And then he has some questioning. We have Omira in that episode.
Yes.
The question, why don't you take off your helmet?
Right.
Why don't you stay here? Why don't you, those kinds of things.
And that puts him on the path of learning. The covert wasn't necessarily bad. The guild wasn't necessarily bad. What they taught, how they raised him, everything like that, it wasn't bad. But we're seeing Din learn more about how to live his own life and not live a life for the Mandalorian Guild and all of that. So
How do you feel like Din's identity as a foundling shapes the way he sees himself and others early on in this season?
I think that he sees himself as nothing without the Mandalorian creed as a foundling.
Children of the Watch.
Yeah, that's how he sees everything. And I think it even goes to, he immediately thought of that with Grogu. he immediately, like we see, Grogu was trying to become his foundling. Like that's something that we've research more and discover more later in the series. So it's important to him, it's vital to him, and it feels like something that he feels committed to, devoted to, for sure.
Does being a foundling make his identity stronger, or does it make it more fragile?
I don't think it does either. Really, I think it's more. It's just who he is. It in some ways makes him stronger because he, like Nathan said, he wants to help Grogu instead of finishing this contract, without a second thought, right? He likely would not have been so sensitive to the child, to this target, if he was not a foundling, right? But in other ways, it does hold him back, so to speak, right? He's less trusting. He hides behind things, right? He keeps everything at an arm's length. So I think it just makes him who he is, in a way.
Do you think Din is choosing his identity or just inheriting it because of growing up a family with the Children of the Watch?
I think he's inheriting it. I think that's the whole purpose of the show. For later seasons, we see him grow out of the Mandalorian covert, away from it. And that's set on a path by Grogu, by this catalyst event that sets him away from this Mandalorian covert. He still respects and appreciates them, but he finds his own identity outside of all of that, which is, I think, a major purpose of his character arc throughout the show.
I don't know if he necessarily grows away from the covert or even really finds something separate from them. I think he just finds a better way to function within it. I mean, the whole beginning of season 3 is all about him trying to get back within good graces of the covert. So he very much still follows the way. He still, is a part of the covert. He leads the covert back to Mandalore later. Like, he's still very much a part of the covert. I think he just learns how to be more confident in himself in a way. Yeah. I mean, he's obviously, when we meet him in the beginning of season 1, he's already a highly accomplished bounty hunter, no doubt about it. But he ends up becoming an even stronger bounty hunter because of, it all boils down to trust. His character arc is just developing trust in everyone around him. And through gaining trust in everybody around him, he becomes a even better bounty hunter and, leader to these, a sort of leader to these Mandalorians later down the line.
How do you feel like the rule that the Children of the Watch have, which was a new thing in Star Wars when we start seeing this episode, I don't even remember if it's in the first episode necessarily, but we learned it very quickly in this, the rule to never remove the helmet with it. Do you feel like that is designed to create a stronger identity among all as a Mandalorian, right? Everyone looks very similar because of that, right? They all wear those helmets. They all have that Mandalorian helmet, that Beskar, and you'd only see them from that perspective. So it becomes a group identity, or do you feel like that actually creates isolation for these people because no one ever knows or sees who you truly are with that?
I think I'm taking a very non-committal stance on a lot of these points, but I think it's a little bit of both. And my reason for that is if Mandalorians weren't able to customize their armor like you see so many very different looks within the series, I would say it's to kind of isolate everyone and keep everyone the same. I mean, going back to what Nathan said, that's a very, real world cultish tactic. But each of the Mandalorians is able to change the way their armor looks to personalize it for themselves, right? To give them an identity. So in a way, I think it just gives them a second skin in a way. Everyone, who you're talking to when you look at them because everyone looks a little different, right? They've got a different paint job, different helmet style, different armor, whatever, right? But I think it's also because as a society, as a culture, right? The Mandalorians were hurt. They were destroyed, right? So I think that they believe, this Children of the Watch believes, the only way that they can truly be safe from going forward is have just a little bit of a safety net behind them, which I think is that keeping your true self hidden from everybody. But there's still that shared experience with everyone.
Do you think that the reality that Mandalore was settled by people from multiple cultures and planets originally plays into this, because now they all do look the same and yet they have that individualism? Do you feel like that's probably part of what this idea is? We all are Mandalorians, even though we can look very individual about it.
Yeah, I think it's just Mandalore themselves, itself was very culture rich with many different, like, I guess covert tribes, whatever you like call them. Clans. And so being able to have kind of Mandalore's gone. There's not many options when it comes to being Mandalorian anymore at this point in the series. So having that melting pot of just everybody together, I also think that the whole not removing the helmet thing comes from a sense of protection for the clan, for the covert. Anonymity is vital. If other people know what you look like, it's going to be way easier to find you. It's going to be way easier to find everybody else. I mean, they're living underground for a reason. So I think it leads itself to just being more of we're in this situation all together. Let's just make the best with it as we can.
So the job that Din Djarin receives through it's Grief Karga. Yeah, through Grief Karga. He goes to the client, he gets this job. It's supposed to be simple, right? You retrieve the asset, you get paid, you move on. But then we get to the end of episode 1 and Din obviously sees Grogu and something shifts within him. And I don't think it's because of anything that Grogu does. He doesn't do anything. He's just sitting there looking cute with this, like the love child of Yaddle and Yoda with that. But
still hasn't been, well, the age wouldn't work. Never mind.
What changes is what that makes when Din sees him, what it makes him feel. With this is the disruption moment,
right?
Within this, it's not an external thing. It's not a big moment. Like, you don't see anything flashy happening in the episode. It's very internal type thing. And like a lot of moments in Star Wars, the galaxy isn't what changes first. It's the person that does. So when Din encounters Grogu on Arbala 7, why is this more than just another bounty for him when he finally encounters him?
I think it's more a bounty. It's not a bounty to him. Correction. Because I think he sees himself a little bit in Grogu, a child without a place, and he was rescued out of that. And so he's trying to figure out how to rescue this child. It's a realization of, I'm in a position where I can help or potentially hurt. And I think the thing that kills him the most is if he does fully deliver and leave Grogu where he is, what are they going to do? And the unknown of what's going to happen to him, I think, kills Din more than anything else. So,
well, he doesn't resign himself to saving Grogu yet. That's not until episode 3, I think. Right? He's still returning the asset to the client at this point. All he does that's out of character in this first episode is he stops IG-11 from killing Grogu. Right. And that, more than anything, is just him having a flashback to literally where we first, how he was saved later on, we find out, right? He was about to be shot down by a droid as a child, right? And then a Mandalorian came in and saved him, and then that's how he ended up joining the covert, right? So I think in that moment, it's just he's seeing himself in Grogu, but he's still going to, in his mind at this moment, try to complete the bounty. So,
what do you feel like, in the second episode, as they're making their way back to his ship, you have this encounter with the Mudhorn, and Grogu uses the Force to save Din Djarin from being destroyed with this. How does that moment begin to change Din's perception of the galaxy?
Yeah, I mean, we know that when he's talking to the armorer later, that he explains that he saw the child move things in his mind. He has no idea what this is. He's never heard of the Force, none of that, right? Jedi, Sith, all that's new to him. So I think that moment, more so than if he had even heard legends of these wizards or whatever, more so than anything, showed him there are forces in this galaxy, for lack of a better word, that he doesn't understand. I mean, Mandalorian culture, like he says, weapons are a part of his religion, right? That's all it is. It's jetpacks, armor, and guns, right? Like, that's all you need to get by, and you know, your Mandalorian brethren. That's all you need. And that's all there really is to the galaxy. And then all of a sudden, this innocent child who needed saving not a day ago,
completely vulnerable, it seems
right, not a day ago, is now lifting a massive creature off the ground like it's nothing, right? So I think it really shifts Mando's perspective, and I think that's also part of the reason why he goes later to save Grogu, is because there's something even more special about this child. So
yeah.
How does the does that using of the Force in that second episode, does that make Grogu more valuable to Din as a bounty, do you feel like, or is it just helping him see that there's something bigger going on?
Yeah, I think it adds more depth to who Grogu is, and I think it makes it more valuable to Din as just an individual, as a creature. Like, it's like, oh, there's way more to this creature than I originally thought. I need to consider what I'm trying to do here.
And I think it makes him wonder why this client wants this kid specifically. So, well,
yeah, and I think that we have to recall that Din does know the Empire.
Right.
Yeah. And he knows the client is part of the Empire because he's seen these stormtroopers. He knows that the Beskar that he was paid the down payment with was insignia of the Empire on it. And all of that is, I'm sure, playing into what is this Imperial remnant seeking to do with this being, with that. So we get to back to, what's the name, Navarro, with that, and he completes the job. He hands Grogu over to the client, and for a moment it feels like, I mean, he gets paid, the ice cream maker of Beskar, with that. Everything is exactly as it's supposed to be, with this, until it isn't. With this, some choices don't sit quietly with us, and they echo long after this. And so Din, whether or not it's because he sees himself in this vulnerable foundling with it or whatever, he goes back and he gets Grogu, and he breaks the code that defines him. And I think that it's important for us to think about the fact he's got two codes that he's applying to his life. He's got the Children of the Watch, the Mandalorian Creed, but you've also got the Bounty Hunter Code with this. And he does it because he knows that something isn't right about this child. This is the beginning of who Din Djarin really is. He's growing with this. Why is Din's decision to rescue Grogu from the client and the Imperial remnant, why does that become such a defining moment in this story?
I think it becomes a defining moment because it changes Din's perspective on kind of what he feels like he's allowed to do. He's lived his life in these rules and these codes and these boxes, and the second that he just breaks it, we start to see him change. We start to see him come to be a semi-different person, and we learn that there's more to Din Djarin than just the codes that he lives by. there's somebody under that mask. There's somebody actually caring under there. So we start to see that in episode 3 when he does save Grogu.
Yeah. What does the choice cost him in terms of his place with the Bounty Hunters Guild?
Well, I mean, he loses his place, right? He's exiled from it. And I think really what it boils down to is it's a question of loyalty. Where does his loyalty lie, to a person or to these groups that he's a part of, right? I mean, we first see him betray the Bounty Hunters Guild, which arguably he cared about the least between the two. Let's just be real, right? It was a means to a living at that point, right? So he went against the guild just to save Grogu, and then later he goes against the guild again to save Grogu, where he I think in the second season he removes his helmet in front of people.
He goes against the Children of the Watch.
Right. That's what I meant. Yeah, the covert. To save Grogu, right? So it's this question. He begins to question, what's really worth it to save the life of someone he cares about. Which,
but he doesn't even. I don't think he even cares about Grogu yet. I mean, there's not really an emotional bond between them at this point. He in the first or second episode, there's curiosity.
Yes.
He uses the Force to save him. He wants to understand what that is. But his goal is to get that bounty back to the client, get paid the Beskar, take that Beskar to the armorer, use some of it for other foundlings, use most of it for his own armor, and to move on with it. And it's interesting because there's that conversation while the armorer is receiving the Beskar to forge all this armor, where she talks about this being a foundling and the responsibility, or not Grogu being a foundling. She talks about this portion is going to go to the foundlings, right? And it feels to me like in that moment, that's when Din starts to think about, wait, part of the creed is to protect foundlings. And then he gets out of there and is like, wait a second, I didn't protect this foundling. So now he's really being faced, do I choose the creed or do I choose the bounty hunter code with it? And he goes back and does this. How does this moment for you guys at least compare to other big Star Wars choices with this? I mean, you've got obviously Anakin, you've got Luke, you've got Rey, you've got all of these major moments where they're faced with these choices. What was that moment like in that episode, as far as being able to be compared to some of those other choices in Star Wars in the past?
I think it's for lack of a better word, cheapened, because all of the repercussions are undone.
Okay.
By the end of the series, right? He's back in the guild, if not at a higher standing, right? The covert now has an even better presence on Navarro later down the line, right? There's obviously some road bumps that have to be overcome within those these first two seasons, but ultimately everything works out better for it in the end. So, I say that in that everything's undone, right? The big decisions in the rest of Star Wars, right? Like Anakin's major choice, right? I mean, obviously
the ramifications are
unfathomable, right? You can almost not quantify it. So I wouldn't even hardly rank this anywhere in that case, because ultimately nothing really changes in the end.
I think that, while I do understand where you're coming from, I think that the fact that everything does get rectified and is actually better at this point makes the choice so much more impactful, because you begin to think about what would have happened if he didn't do that. If he didn't make that choice, who knows how much worse what the future could have been. And the fact that he did make that choice out of care for Grogu at that point, which I think that he started to develop at least maybe a curiosity for him, if not care for him, because he saved his life, and a devotion to the code for the Children of the Watch. Being committed to those led him to be even greater by the end of what we've seen in the series because of that choice. So it led him to a better state. So it's an important choice. It's a good one.
I do think it's interesting to think about the fact that when we get to the end of season 3, all of that has been restored. The Empire's been defeated. He's back with the Bounty Hunter Guild, basically. And we're seeing some of that as far as criticisms of even what we know is happening in the Mandalorian and Grogu film, right? Because he loses the Razor Crest at the end of season 2 of the Mandalorian, and he gets a new Razor Crest in this. We've seen that with at the end of season 2, he gives Grogu to Luke, and Luke goes to take him off to train him as a Jedi. And if you don't watch the Book of Boba Fett, you get back and you're like, wait a second.
He's back.
He's back with Mando again. And so, there is this element where it feels like it's like the repercussions or the ramifications of some of these moments are just getting reversed with that. And so I understand where you're coming on it. He leaves there after the Sin episode and he goes to the frontier, right? And so he goes to Sorgan, which is, like I said earlier, my favorite episode of this season. He goes to Tatooine, which obviously we love that with this. He goes on the prison ship where he has to break out the Twi'lek on that. And each stop in this season really does feel like a test. It's not really a test of his skills because we've already seen those, especially even the opening of the series with that. It's a test of trust. Din has to learn how to rely on others and how to protect instead of hunt, and how to stay with something or with someone instead of just leave. When things get hard. And each time that's going on, Grogu is present. He's watching, he's learning, just like Din had to when he was a foundling on that. And this is where the lone warrior in that we start with Din Djarin begins to change into something more. And I think that we're going to really see that continue into the Mandalorian and Grogu with that. How did Din's experiences on these other planets like Sorgan and Tatooine and on the prison ship and those types of things, how does that begin to reshape his identity even further?
I think, like you said, it does go into trust. I mean, on the prison ship, he has to work with a crew.
Yeah, a crew of his former allies and that he betrayed.
Right.
And they're out to get him.
They betray him.
Yeah.
They betray him at the end. Yeah. So it does come into trust and still trusting despite betrayal, even through that. And like you said, I think also we're put into kind of Grogu's shoes while watching this series, because we're also watching Din go through all of this as Grogu is going through all of this and watching Din deal with this and learning more and more of who Din's character is throughout this. We can all agree Grogu has high intelligence, even at he's 50 years old, so makes sense. But we see him start to develop an understanding and develop a relationship with Din before Din develops a full relationship with Grogu. But that comes to trust for sure. And it shapes Din more and more, the fact that Grogu does trust him by the end of the series. Well, season especially.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that right after the Sin, where this covert whom he's probably not really had to rely on to this extent, or trust to this extent, come through in his moment of need and save him and Grogu,
at the end of the Sin, yeah.
And then it immediately goes into, I guess, 2 episodes where he's betrayed back to back, right? You got the Tatooine episode. I don't know if I've got the Sorgan
episode, then the Tatooine episode.
Okay, so the Sorgan episode, he learns to trust more. It's complete strangers at this point, right?
This is where he also meets Cara Dune.
Right, that's what I'm saying, right? He's never met this girl before, but he ends up trusting her to save this village, right? And then, is a complete stranger. The covert, you can kind of expect him to sort of understand trusting that because he's grown up with them, right? But then you get to Tatooine, I guess. I don't know if Tatooine's next. Yeah, and then there's that new up-and-coming bounty hunter that he goes out on a limb.
Yeah, Toro Calicut.
Yeah, that he goes out on a limb to try to help, right? And he ends up getting backstabbed with that. Nothing happens. He ends up out shooting him in a really cool, Western duel. But again, that's going to start setting back his trust, right? And then he goes to the prison ship, right? Is that in this season?
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's the next
that's right.
episode.
That's right. And there's this crew who he's already pretty, iffy about trusting anyway. But he has to go and in a way, trust them to get through the mission, and they end up betraying him again, right? And there's very few lights in between those episodes where he met someone he trusts, except I don't remember her name, but the technician on the Tatooine. Pelly. She becomes a regular, right? He can trust her and interestingly, he trusts her because of the way that she treats Grogu. I don't know if there's something
That's
there,
true.
but it is.
Right.
I think that's why he's so willing to continue to lean on her in the coming seasons.
Why does Din hesitates on Sorgan? He's basically invited by Omira to stay, and he, even though he is willing to leave Grogu there with them for his upbringing and safety, he's going to leave with that. Why does he hesitate so much to kind of stay connected to Grogu and to settle down in that situation? Why do you feel like he resists that in that episode so much?
I mean, he would be giving up the way he's lived his whole life, basically. I mean, he'd have to give up being Mandalorian, right? He's got to take off the helmet. He's going to have to live a new life, give up on the covert. I don't think that's an easy decision.
Not an easy decision at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just really boils down to that.
Yeah, I agree.
How do you feel like in the prison ship episode, which we get that great cameo by Matt Lanter?
That was cool. That was cool.
But, how does that whole episode reflect kind of an evolving morality for Din? I mean, he refuses to kill the prisoners despite their betrayal. Remember, he locks them up in a prison ship. Why do you feel like the bounty hunter that was so quick to kill is in episode 1, pretty much anything and anybody, is now not willing to do that by the time we get to the prison episode?
I think Grogu has given him a reason to be better. I think he wants to be better for something that he wants to protect Grogu. And that comes from protecting him from a life that I don't even know if Din enjoys. I don't think he enjoys having to kill. I don't know anyone who really would. So he wants to protect Grogu from that life. And going back to why he was ready to leave Grogu on Sorgan, that would be getting him out, not having him around for things that he shouldn't be around for. Doesn't end up that way. He tries to put him off on Luke. Still doesn't end up that way because Grogu's place is with Din. And of course, Din doesn't understand that fully in season 1, but no matter what, Din still feels like he needs to protect Grogu from everything that happens from that. So he has a reason to be put at a higher standard for these moments.
We haven't talked at all about Moff Gideon, really. And we talked about the Darksaber a little bit in our initial thoughts of this season.
He doesn't show up.
He shows up in the last episodes, the end of episode 7, and then throughout episode 8 with this. I'll make a statement here and see what you guys think about this. I don't think Moff Gideon really wants Grogu. I think he wants what Grogu represents with this. I think that he sees Grogu as his pathway to more power, more control, to elevating himself within the Imperial remnant to a higher level. I think that we're going to see, especially in season 3, this competing groups within the Imperial remnant, the Thrawn side of things and the Moff Gideon side of things. And Din sees Grogu truly as a child.
Right.
And that's why it changes him. Moff Gideon and really the entire Empire at this point sees him as sees Grogu as a resource.
Right. 100%.
With this. And this really is the core conflict of season 1. It's not just good versus evil. It's compassion with Din versus control. with the Empire on this. And that's obviously a theme that stretches across Star Wars into all of the different stuff that we see in the Mandoverse. Why do you feel like Moff Gideon's interest in Grogu represents more than just a typical villain goal?
I think it boils down to, Moff is cut and dry villain. He's only in it for himself, all that kind of stuff. But he's single-mindedly focused on Grogu to be able to reach that goal. Like, he banks everything on Grogu at this point. And the only thing that matters is getting that child into his hands, which in some ways is silly because I'm sure there are many other ways that he could have gotten a higher rank and moved up in the Imperial Remnant. But we see him so devoted to this cause, and we see kind of the antithesis of Din in these moments. Din is completely devoted to protecting this child. Moff doesn't care a lick about what happens to him outside of he needs him. That's it. And Din is just, I'll do anything to make sure that this child is protected and safe at this moment. That feels like his responsibility now. When Din feels like he threw all of his other responsibilities out the window by saving this child became his responsibility. So I think we see those differences between Din and Moff make Moff a great villain, but different than what we've seen a lot of villains before in Star Wars.
Up until this point in season 1, we don't really have a lot of villains, and we have like little individual things. The Raiders on
Freak of the Week kind of thing.
The villain of the week type situation. How does Gideon's arrival? I mean, even the client feels that way. He's just almost a MacGuffin to get to Grogu, right? But then when Gideon shows up at the end of episode 7, in that TIE fighter with all of those stormtroopers and all of that shifts things. On the why, what does the arrival of Gideon reveal about what's happening in the galaxy at this point in Star Wars?
Well, I mean, I think that his arrival really does show that the Empire is not as gone as everyone thought, right? I mean, a lot of this show, I feel like, has taken steps to show kind of why the First Order was able to show up in Episode 7, right? The New Republic are buffoons, basically. They're barely keeping together with what they've got, let alone paying attention to these actual threats happening, right? And so now all of a sudden there's way more of an Imperial presence than we thought, right? And this guy shows up, and he's not just another Imperial officer, right? This guy, he shows up and he knows everything about everyone that's stuck in that bar, right? He's calling out, who Cara Dune is and the people she's lost. He knows about Din Djarin somehow, right? He's talking about Grief Karga, right? He not only is he dangerous in terms of force, but he's dangerous in terms of knowledge, right? And at a time in the galaxy that we resume, or we are in this show, it seems like knowledge is highly powerful, right? I mean, sure, if one group's bigger than the other, they're going to probably be able to fight. But it's such a tumultuous time in the galaxy. Being able to have a leg up on your opponent through any means necessary feels more weighty. And I think that the way they introduce Moff Gideon really shows that the Empire is not something that is gone. It still needs to be dealt with a bit.
Yeah, I agree.
When is Moff Gideon pursuing Grogu in order to accomplish what we later find out is the Empire's ultimate goal, the Emperor's ultimate goal of cloning and creating a body for him? Or is this what is he really just pursuing his own goals, which we see at the end of season 3, where he's cloning his own creating a clone army of himself. With that, what do you think? Do we know where do we know where he's at this point?
Well, I do think we know where he's at. I think Moff Gideon is one of those that has a long-term goal and definitely is already planning on that. But at this point, it's hard to understand if he's really doing it for himself or if he is doing it for the Emperor. I'd like to say that at this point, we see him kind of doing it to get higher up in the ranks, to be in good graces with the Emperor at this point, for a new body. But it wouldn't surprise me if Moff is just already in it for himself at this point.
I think at this point, he's really truly doing this for, what do they call the project? It's got some
Necromancer.
Project Necromancer. I really do think he's doing it just to try to bring the Emperor back at this point. And then when we get to see him in season 3 and he keeps getting clobbered by this same group of Mandalorians over and over again, I think he's had it. And he's like, I'm
done.
I don't care about Project Necromancer anymore. I don't care about all this other stuff. I want to take the Mandalorians down. I want to reclaim Mandalore for the Empire, right? By any means necessary. So he's so full of himself at this point that I think his goals then shift from helping the Emperor to helping himself.
Yeah. I want to go back to something that you brought up earlier, Sam, about the idea of this community or this tribe that is being developed throughout this season with Cara and Grief and all of that. He doesn't do this alone. By the end of this, he's got Queel throughout, which we haven't really talked about that at all. He's a great character. You guys mentioned IG-11 and how he comes back in the final episodes with it. Each one, Cara, Grief, obviously. Each one of these characters changes Din Djarin.
Mm-hmm.
They help him. They challenge the way he thinks about survival and how survival requires isolation. To make it. And then you have IG-11 at the end with his final act, which is obviously so sad, amazing. And a droid once built to kill, which is everything that Din thinks of when he thinks of droids,
right?
With it choosing to protect them with this, which goes back to this found family concept that is so prevalent throughout all of Star Wars. It's like a common thing.
Vital.
Pretty much everything with it. Star Wars isn't about the family you're born into. It's the family that you choose with this. So how do characters like Cara Dune and Queel influence Din's transformation throughout season 1?
I think it's pieces of him that he wants to see. Like, I think we see different parts of all these people that he learns from and grows from, and is like, I kind of want to be that a little more. I kind of want to be that a little more. Instead of who he was, he's trying to find out who he wants to be, because his identity can be his own at this point now. He has that choice. He has that choice because he already made a big choice earlier on in the thing. Why not make another one? So we see him figuring out from all these people, and then IG-11 represents that what he may know might not be the gospel truth right there. He thought droids are just meant to kill. They're evil. Like, nothing good can come from droids. And then the last person he thought to save him from that would be IG-11 ends up being IG-11. So his thoughts on who an enemy could be kind of gets shattered at that point. So his guard and who he is torn down. And then he learns from all these people what he could be. And we see that way more in season 2. And of course, we see that a lot more in season 3. I'm sure we'll see more of it in Mandalorian and Grogu. It always happens. But I think that we start to see the seeds of that place in this season.
Din, how does Din's growing trust in others, like we see with Cara and Grief and all of this, how does that mirror that growing bond he has throughout this season with Grogu?
Yeah, I'm not sure really. I mean, I don't see much. I think it's just a less direct connection in that he's opening up more in every way. Becoming more vulnerable, which it goes against what he's grown up in. He's lived his whole life encased in a suit of armor. So being vulnerable physically and emotionally is tricky for him. And now he's seeing people like Cara Dune, this random chick that he met on a backwater planet, come to his hour of need when he needs it. A droid who he killed and was designed to kill, coming back and saving him. Grief Karga, a man he betrayed,
yeah,
coming back and helping him again, right?
Right.
So all of these things, I think, just compound to almost tell Din that it's okay. You can trust people again.
Let down your wall.
Your wall, right? And I think that's ultimately manifested in Grogu and in his relationship with Grogu.
Nate, what do you think is what's the symbolism in the fact that the only time that we see Din Djarin remove his helmet the entire first season of The Mandalorian is to remove it to a droid?
Jeez, I think it's very much showing that we're seeing a different Din now. Like we're seeing a Din that is going to grow. It's an indication that who he was before is not who we will see later down the line. And if anything, it's for an emotional, like, not shock moment, but it's giving people like a grasp that, wow, there's very much a change happening with Din and with how he behaves and all of that. And so I think that's how that happens for sure.
I think it's the ultimate in this season, the ultimate form of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, from the first episode, like the very first moment of the first episode, he's like, no, I don't want anything.
Yeah, I don't even want to ride in a
speeder driven by a droid, right? From the get-go, they make it abundantly clear Din Djarin doesn't like droids, right? And then we see why later. So him doing the thing that he's sworn to never do again to a droid of all things, I mean, the amount of faith and trust that would take on his part is monumental.
So that droid can save his life.
Right.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
It's the ultimate form of trust.
Which it's interesting too, because I mean, I'm trying to recall Queel's. I know in episode 7, Queel's backstory is fleshed out more. How he used to work for the Empire, with the other Ugnaughts, and he's ashamed of who he was, with that. But also now he's become something better,
right?
With that, and I think that relationship in season 1 is not discussed enough at how much that impacts Din Djarin's understanding that he doesn't have to remain who he's always been told he has to be. He can be something better. He can be something more. He can redefine himself because he learns Queel does that. Queel believes that Din can do that. With it, he does that with IG-11. Queel transforms IG-11 to be something that it was not designed to be. With that, and then IG-11 saves his life, and Queel gives his life for the child with that. So, we get to the end of this, and really, Din is no longer the same person he was when he started this season.
Right.
With that, I mean, he's still a Mandalorian. He's still technically keeping the creed because no human has no organic,
no living thing,
no organic is the way they describe it. Has seen his face with it, but he's a lot more than that. He's a protector now. He's starting to take on a lot of father aspects with that. He's a guide, and the armorer tasks him in these final episodes with returning Grogu to his kind, which I think is really curious because the armorer seems to know about the Force, knows about the Jedi, and then we know that the Children of the Watch seem to be an evolution of Death Watch, which knew Maul and all of that. So there's a lot of transformation on this. It's not really the end of Din's journey. It's the beginning of a kind of a new one. It's really the launch of all of that. One that's going to obviously continue forward in the Mandalorian and Grogu film with this. It's still unfolding a lot. But how does Din's mission to return Grogu to his people suddenly redefine his purpose?
I think he's got a higher, for lack of, I think he's got a higher purpose at this point. I mean, up until then, all he's done is an odd bounty hunting job here and there, right? Get this guy, bring him back, kill him if you have to, make a quick buck, return what you can to the covert, and then do it again tomorrow, right? Now he's got this being of immeasurable wealth and power, as he finds out, right? The Empire was willing to kill anyone that's in their way for this kid,
Right.
This creature needs him to be able to fulfill his destiny, right? So he's gone from just being a bounty hunter to a protector, and that's a new role for him.
Yeah.
That we see him embrace in later on, and then obviously he ends up adopting Grogu. But up until that point, he's got a higher mission.
Yeah, I think it's responsibility at this point, and more of an obligation that you chose this path. Continue on it, and when he's continuing on it, he's learning more about himself. We see that responsibility changes his mindset, changes his view, changes how he operates, everything, trusts, all that. And so having Grogu be a part of that in this first season helps him understand that there's more to the galaxy than the covert, than the bounty hunter guild, all of that, and that there are so many things that he doesn't know yet, and now he has a responsibility to protect this kid. So that's what he determines is his mission for now.
How has the phrase "this is the way" changed for Din Djarin throughout this season? Let me see if I can explain what I mean. This is the way. It feels to me at the beginning of the season is about strict adherence to all of the laws of the Children of the Watch, the Creed.
Right.
I don't think he understands the reason behind those rules.
Yeah, I think it's he's focused on the letter of the law as opposed to the intent in a way.
Yeah.
And I think by the end of this first season, certainly by the end of the series, he realizes those rules were put in place, whether they are necessarily the best or not is not the point. He realizes that those rules were put in place ultimately to save people, to protect people, right? Most of it, I think, is to protect the covert, right? The fellow Mandalorians,
culture, to protect, yeah.
But I think this even goes to the armorer as well. I think they both realize the creed extends to just helping the innocent in a way, right? Now, I think they're able to apply it to Grogu because he's a foundling at this point, right? So it makes sense that they could apply the creed to it. But I think they're ending up helping the citizens of Navarro and things like that, right? They realize that their goal or their job as Mandalorians is to just protect the innocent, protect who they can, and that's ultimately what the creed represents. And that's so the term "this is the way" kind of adopts that meaning.
Yeah, it does feel like there's a different weight.
Yeah.
To that phrase, like this is the way this is the way we're supposed to, these are the rules that we live by, versus this is the way we protect others. We protect the foundlings. We care for foundlings. We care for each other. We protect the community. Those types of things versus just rules. With that, how does Nate? I'll ask this one to you, Nate. How does Din's relationship with Grogu, as it evolves, especially in this season, redefine what strength is?
Hard-hitting question. Redefine what strength is. I think strength is in the quiet moments that we see. It's not in, guns ablazing, go in, shoot up the place, get out of it. It's strength in being there to protect in all of the moments. It comes to being willing to have Grogu be away from him so that Grogu can be protected. That takes strength. He obviously wants to protect and care for this creature, this child. He's willing to abandon it in a place that's safer to be able to have that happen. That takes a lot of strength. Strength in trusting a droid. He never have done that before he met Grogu, but he does now because he needs to, and it's required. So he has the strength there. So yeah, that's the fun part of it.
Why is protecting someone harder than fighting for yourself?
What do you mean? I don't see what you mean.
At the beginning of season 1 of The Mandalorian, Din is about the bounty and about protecting himself, self-preservation with this. And then throughout the season, he grows to the only thing that matters is protecting Grogu.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that such a hard transition for us to accept, like caring for someone else over ourselves?
I think everyone's just naturally selfish in a lot of ways. And it's a constant struggle to overcome it. I mean, that comes down to the Jedi code. I mean, it's giving up of yourself to protect others. It's selflessness in every way.
Yeah, but the Jedi code struggles with that because the Jedi codes, it so resists any attachment that it becomes we protect all just because we protect.
Right.
Versus there's compassion, which is the biggest challenge of the prequel trilogy.
Right. And I think we've talked about that flaw before. We think that the Jedi should have been able to form attachments, and that ultimately is what works in Din's favor, is the attachment that he ends up forming with Grogu. But I think it's just that constant struggle of giving up of yourself for the higher purpose of helping others.
Yeah. What would you say, both of you kind of will end with this, what would you say is the biggest impact season 1 of The Mandalorian will have on The Mandalorian and Grogu? Like, how do you see that impacting that film itself?
It's hard because, I mean, there's 2.5 seasons of development for this character between.
I see what you did.
Yeah, you see what I did there. He's not, like I said, so much of what happens in season 1 is either undone or grown upon to a large degree within the following seasons. So it's hard to really pick one thing out of season 1 that's going to directly impact The Mandalorian and Grogu besides things that are just expanded upon in later seasons. If I had to pick, I think it's just, Din Djarin's sense of helping the larger picture in a way, or seeing the larger picture. I mean, while plot details are sparse for Mandalorian and Grogu, he's clearly gotten himself into a bigger situation than we've seen him even previously at this point, right? So I think there's going to be a further development of him realizing that he's a part of something bigger, and so as a result of that, bigger sacrifices will need to follow.
Yeah, definitely. Sacrifice is probably going to be a major plot point, I feel like, in Mandalorian and Grogu. Specifically, like if you're looking at season 1, IG-11's sacrifice, I think will not maybe directly play, but at least influence potentially Din in Mandalorian and Grogu. I don't think he's making it out of the movie, I'm going to be honest.
Din Djarin?
I don't think so.
That is a bold claim.
I know it's a bold claim, but especially with what they were saying in the trailers, just, I don't know. It feels like we're going to get something. And yeah, that would definitely make.
They're going to kill Grogu. Is actually
they're not killing Grogu.
They're not killing Grogu. So I think that sacrifice for others is going to heavily play in The Mandalorian and Grogu.
Yeah, because he was willing to sacrifice himself at the end of the first. I think he was willing to blow himself up or something, to take everyone down at the end of the lava tunnel. So yeah, I think you got a point.
So what defines who we are? At the beginning of the story, it looks like rules. It's tradition. It's survival. But by the end, it's something else. entirely. It's the moment that we choose someone else over ourselves. That's the moment that we step outside of what's expected and we do what's right. That is the heart of The Mandalorian Season 1, and it's why this story matters so much as we move closer to The Mandalorian and Grogu, because everything that comes next is built on this one choice. It's a lone Mandalorian choosing a child, and in doing so, he's becoming something new. So if you've enjoyed this conversation as much as we had, we'd love for you to be a part of this journey with us. Go ahead, like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. We are walking through the entire story together as we lead up to The Mandalorian and Grogu in May. And trust me, you are going to want to be here for it. So may the Force be with you.